I'll try to do a quick look back of the equipment and tools we took on our 2022 trip up to Tuktoyaktuk. It's going to be in a slide format, so you can always pause, look in detail at any of the slides. I'm not going to go through them in great detail, but the information is there as to what I carried on the trip. There were several bikes on the trip. I'm sure we ended up with 5 compressors with us. And the reason for that is we didn't know how we were going to travel up there, and we weren't sure which directions people were coming back. So the intent was everybody was going to be self-sufficient for this trip. There's a very good piece of research, this document. I'll link it in the description. Gives you lots of information. I would highly recommend you have a look at it and use that to start piecing together and planning your trip up the Dempster. These are the type of things that you have to get right on your trip, because if you don't get this part right, you're not going to be successful. So these are all the logistical things you need to get right. And fuel and tires are 2 of the really key things, but you need to be aware of the others. You also need to be aware if the weather is not on your side, you're probably going to have a tough time being successful. But given all these logistical things, you also need to get these components correct, because these almost supersede the logistical pieces. And if you fail here, then you could fail on your trip. So you need to set your expectations. You may not make it on your first attempt. You might have to come back and try again. But you need to know when's the right time to make the decision. Am I proceeding, or are we turning back? This is just a fun slide I like to put up there. So I'd been up there in 2016. We actually had tires shipped to Whitehorse, put them on in Whitehorse. I felt invincible on my brand new TKC 80s. Left the other tires in Whitehorse, 40 kilometers north of the Arctic Circle. My bike started feeling a little bit funny. I didn't know what was going on, but I had a slow leak on the rear. I continued driving the bike with the weight on the back until I had a blowout. And so now the bead was no longer set on the rim, and I've got a flat. I could not get enough air in the tire to reseat the bead, nor find the leak. That tire had to go back to Eagle Plains with a second rider, and it took about 5 hours. Fortunately, they were still open, and we solved it that way. So tires are huge, and you want to make sure you have good tires because the road conditions can be really poor. We went up in 2018 to make a run at Tuk because the highway had just opened to Tuk. This time we hauled tires up from Calgary, spooned them on in Whitehorse, continued on our way to the Dempster. This is my bike at the Dempster with those tires on them. I cached them here and just continued on with just a lighter load. And that's what it looks like when we got turned back with snow on the Dempster in September. And this is at Eagle Plains, kind of what used to be the halfway point of the Dempster. So because we failed then, we figured we better go back up there. Made an attempt in 2019. Again, hauled tires up there with the intent to put them on in Whitehorse, but the weather was good. We kept driving, and we continued driving until we got to Eagle Plains at about 1 in the morning in the rain. And I just put the knobbies on the following morning for the trip up to Tuktoyaktuk. And that was our first successful trip all the way to Tuk. So this is really going to be about this trip and what did I take with me for packing for the Dempster. I'll get some things right. I'll get some things wrong. You might have some questions. You might have some comments. Fire them into the comments. I'm happy to learn from whatever you may want to add to my trip. So this is what my Honda CB500X looks like from behind, and typically how I load the bike up. There's one bag not shown that sits on top of that orange Scully waterproof bag in the center, but I have another 15-liter bag that rides up top. So I spent quite a bit of time piecing out where was I going to put everything, what would make sense to get easily accessible from where. If it was raining, how do I keep from pulling dry gear out in the rain if I need to access tools and that sort of thing. So the orange bag on top of the pannier, that mainly carried cook stove, fuel, chain lube, those types of things. And then the tool tubes in the back, so there's those two red things, those are 4-inch PVC pipe, about 18 inches long, that would carry my tools. So you can go through all the stuff and you can see the amount of weight I carried on that side. Then on the other side, it was kind of equally balanced with the same sort of concept, except this pannier on the right hand side was all cookware pretty much. Then along the center of the bike, so this bottom closest to us, the orange bag, that's my Scully bag. So I had 15 pounds of gear in it. Then on top of it, which wasn't shown again, was the giant Loop 15-liter waterproof bag that mainly carried my drone and some of my camera supplies, which I use the GoPro quite a bit, did not use the drone all that much. But you know, when you use a drone, it kind of gives you some nice footage if you've got time to stop and fit it all in. Then also along the center of the bike, I also have the tank bag up at the front that had some other rapid access electronics in it. I had a bag that was on the right hand side that had the bear spray and mosquito stuff and my knife, just to be quick access and kind of balanced off the weight. Inside my tool tubes, this is what I carried and had. A lot of it was in the tool wrap on the one side, and then the longer items, like the tire irons, they were in the other side. And there's a whole list of each of those individual kind of pieces that I carried. And I also had other stuff in the bags that weren't individually listed because they were light. This is a whole listing of some of the other stuff that was carried and comprised the load, and worthwhile considering if you're going to make a trip up there. Leo Steiner does a good video of his packing before he left, and he has everything laid out, talks about it, and then after his trip to Inuvik, he relooks at all his gear and decides what wouldn't he have taken with him. And I will link Leo's videos in the description in case you want to have a look at them. And then of course in your jacket you're carrying some of the other stuff, because if you want to bomb into the States from and do the top of the world road, you obviously got to carry your passport and other paraphernalia with you. So my total packed weight was 113 pounds. Kind of looked at it like Leo, what could I have left behind? Well, I probably could have left that battery booster, but we were traveling with 5 bikes, so it's a handy thing. But I do carry little booster cables with me, so maybe didn't need it. My swivel chair is a really luxury, nice to have. We camped 10 of the 13 nights, and I used it a fair bit, so I don't know if I would leave it behind, but it's a bit of weight. And then I've got a jack stand because I don't have a center stand, so I can use that for lubing my chain, or if I've got to pull one of my wheels off. So I can maybe find a rock or shove some other stuff underneath the swing arm to manage that, but I did take it with me. I didn't carry an axe, so you'll see that's not on my list of gear because I knew other guys were bringing axes with them. Now I saw a couple of air mattresses fail on this trip with some of the other guys, and there's almost nothing worse than actually sleeping on the hard ground. So after thinking about it, I think I'd pretty much carry my very small thermarest with me just in case of emergency, because it could make all the difference for a night's sleep. So we had a supply truck come with us. We only knew this near the end, and it had a trailer. So most of the time I was only carrying about 30 pounds on my bike, and all this other gear was carried by the support truck. except for my last day when I carried the weight. But a lot of it was just carried in the trailer. That made a huge difference, and it really helps protect your tires on the Dempster because the rocks are so sharp, and if you can reduce any sort of weight on your bike, you're well advised to. So we did use some of these tools. We did a bunch of tire changes up in Whitehorse on a couple of the bikes. We had to extricate a bike that had gone off the road, so the tow straps were able to be used for that. We had a fuel pump fail. We towed that bike out 20 kilometers until we could rescue it. And then I also got a flat on my own at one point and had to repair that. If you're going on the Dempster, there are certain things that you definitely need. I would say lighten your load. Try to cache or stash as much gear before the Dempster and just take the minimum you need, watch the weather, and see what you can get by with. You can even go lighter than this if you know you can get to the accommodation points. But if you're not sure, then you want to make sure you've got some sort of shelter with you. And that's what it looks like when you're fully packed, headed up there. This is my Ducati, not my CB500X for the previous trips. And this is what it looks like. The one on the left is my Ducati when we got turned back because of the snow, and that's kind of the weight I was carrying. And then because we had that support truck, I was really just carrying 30 pounds on the back of my bike, and it was just luxurious going up there like that. And anyway, that's the end. I hope you find something of use out of that thing. Have a look, pause the slide, tell me what you would have brought, what you think I shouldn't have brought, and I'm happy to answer why I brought what I did. Anyway, thanks a lot for your time. When I was